Confluent is the leading data streaming platform that enables organizations to build these real-time applications and architectures. And it's built on Apache Kafka, the open source distributed event streaming system that you might heard of. But Confluent takes Kafka even further. It's offering like a fully managed cloud native service. It's offering enterprise grade features and tools to integrate streaming data into modern hybrid and multi-cloud environments. So today we have Kai Waehner here, and he points out why this kind of replacement of legacy messaging systems are really important in the age of, let's say, AI and ML models, analytics and automation. And yeah, today's guest, Kai Waehner, is not a typical technologist. He's the bridge between cutting edge tech and business impact. And as global field CTO at Confluent, he works with tech leaders across several industries, from healthcare, finance, gaming, logistics, and then moves beyond static dashboards and goes into the world of data in motion. So he's also an author of the Ultimate Data Streaming Guide and is helping business leaders and executives to make sense of modern data architectures. Hey, this is a long introduction, but Kai, I would like to welcome you to the podcast and start straight with this very critical first question is like, hey, why do you see that most tech leaders oversee this very important part of data streaming in enterprise companies?
So this is a super exciting topic to talk about here today. Let me really explain you why data streaming is getting more and more important these days across all industries. And the reality is today, most workloads are batch or APIs. And with that, customers or in the end, enterprises create spaghetti architectures where they have a lot of point-to-point connections and glue code. And from a business perspective, the consequence is data inconsistencies and the wrong information at the wrong time. And especially in the age of AI, context matters. Because we all use ChatGPT or similar tools every day, but we also learned, sometimes the right way or often the hard way, that these tools hallucinate. They give you wrong information because they don't have the right context. What data streaming can help you with is providing the right context at the right time. This can be real time, meaning in milliseconds. And this is really the fundamental difference between data streaming and existing technologies like your favorite data lake or data warehouse, which is great for some use cases and complementary to data streaming, but for providing the right context now. Also for not just analytical use cases like training a model or doing reports, but also really for operating and running the business. This is exactly where data streaming fits into the discussion.
So, Kai, you're talking about the contextual infrastructure. Could you go back in time and explain, based on history or an experience you had and like existing real world challenges and use cases, why it really matters to have like this data streaming's value?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, where we are coming from is typically where data was processed more even paper-based, but also then with file transfer, and then more and more starting with API approaches so that you can take action in this digital transformation that we see for 10 plus years. And then more now we have digitalization like mobile apps and IoT and all these kind of things, all the companies build today. This is where now you need the context faster at the right moment. And this is exactly where data streaming comes into play. It's not just a real-time messaging layer. This is very important. This is something that exists for 20 plus years. But really taking action on the data right now when it's happening and flying through the system. This is exactly where data streaming differentiates from traditional real-time systems. So it unifies the real-time capability of a message broker with the analytical and processing capabilities like you can also do in a data lake. But in contrary to the data lake, you do it continuously while the data is still hot and interesting. And with that, you can provide the right context when you need it. And for most use cases, right now is better than later.
Talk about like more C-level. So maybe in the management team, you don't only have like the very technical, versatile people, but also you need to argue like from a business value. And I see a lot of misconceptions, like there is Snowflake, there is middleware applications, and they could argue like, hey, it's here, the data streaming. Why do we need like something more specialized or something more enterprise ready? Could you go a bit more into the business value, and for non-tech people, what is really the the result of implementing it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great point. And you're actually absolutely right. So from a marketing perspective, if you go onto all these websites of all the vendors, everybody more or less tells the same story on the very big picture. So it's really hard for the end user to realize what's the difference. And this is also this kind of hidden problem about explaining when and how to use such a really technology product and what's the business value behind this. And so maybe we can take a look at a customer example to explain this. Because the reality is many of these conversations don't start greenfield. So customers also use tools like Snowflake or Databricks for the data platform. And this is very complementary. But as an example, which we have as a public reference, which is Generali, Switzerland as an insurance company, obviously they started from an approach where they have hundreds of databases on premise, IBM, Oracle, and so on. And they wanted to modernize, bring this into a cloud native architecture. The main motivation was to be more elastic, more flexible, and faster time to market. And this is a hard problem which most organizations have. And for that, they leverage data streaming to, on the one side, connect to the legacy infrastructure, not just real-time systems, but also like databases. But then also use the data, process it, and then also feed it into other cloud systems. And this was a slow transition in the beginning, but this then was done over time more and more. And really the business value of data streaming is that in the end, you take information as soon as it happens, even like from a traditional database where you do so-called change data capture, which means when a change happens in that database, maybe even on a mainframe, you also directly get this data in real time and can take action on that. One action might be you feed it into Snowflake. Snowflake on the other side, however, is not low latency. It's not milliseconds or maybe not even seconds, but that's fine. So you have decoupled systems and the data streaming layer takes the data, can keep it and process it, and then also feed it into these layers like Snowflake, or also in more real-time transactional systems like your Salesforce CRM or your SAP ERP system. And providing this data consistency across all these legacy and cloud systems, no matter if they're real-time or APIs or batch. This is really where data streaming is unique with its event-driven architecture and the decoupling between the systems. And this is why customers like Generali leverage data streaming really as their core integration platform to, in the end, build these kind of workloads and IT modernization as a starting point for then building new innovative stuff like AI in the future.
For me, this moment when we had a conversation before was like realizing why it matters that much. And when we talked about AI and agents, which is, definitely super important to have this kind of speed. Can you elaborate on those use cases for machine learning, for AI agents, why it really matters? And when did you realize? Because it's a very new topic.
It's everywhere. Everybody talks about AI. And actually, AI or machine learning is not that new, right? I mean, enterprises use AI especially for predictive analytics like fraud detection or predictive maintenance for many, many years successfully. So the main pattern is clear. And the main pattern for AI is if you send bad data in, you get bad data or predictions out. It's that easy. And this is exactly the argumentation why even before these hot topics like generative AI or now agentic AI, everybody understood also on the executive level that you need good quality data for your AI. And this is why even today, most of these pipelines use data streaming already as an ingestion layer to feed the data into your AI platform for do the model training, because you need good quality data. And you need it as fast as possible. And this is really the foundation. That's what many companies already do, no matter if the outcome is more predictive AI or now more and more use cases around generative AI and agentic AI. But this is just the first step. This is about either building your AI model in predictive AI. But on the other side, especially now with all these large language models, where you typically don't train your models, but you use something like from OpenAI or a big open source model that you integrate into your enterprise environment for privacy and compliance reasons. But the problem with that is, and I think we all have seen that, these models very often hallucinate, which means they don't give you the right answer. But even worse than that, they don't tell you that they don't know. They just give you an answer and assume it's correct. And so it's really hard to solve this problem. And if you take a look at any kind of research or literature, the main problem here is the context. Because if you feed the right context into these models about what's the current status of your situation, then they can use this as part of the prediction, and then they can give you an accurate prediction or recommendation or text or whatever you want to do with the large language model. And this is exactly, again, where data streaming comes into play, because data streaming is not just on the analytical side, like your data lake or data warehouse. It's much more on the operational side. So it also has the data from your SAP system, from your Salesforce CRM, from your application around MongoDB, or whatever you're building in your operational layer that runs your business. And this is really the sweet spot now for building these new AI systems. You still do it in the data lake. This is why I said this is complementary to data streaming. But to provide the right context and then also take the right action, also on a transactional layer, this is where data streaming comes into play. Because even if you have the best agent in your data lake with the AI, if it doesn't have up-to-date information, it cannot take the right transaction and business process. Like if you think about a use case like an airline, where you want to do a seat reservation or a flight booking, this needs to be 100% up-to-date and consistent, because even a second later, if another person has booked this flight and the seat, you cannot sell it again, or the entire business process escalates. And this is really where data streaming sits in the middle between the operational layer and systems and between the AI layer.
I was afraid that you're telling that this is nothing new and it has to be solved since many years. But looking at your profile, you're more than 8 years at Confluent. So obviously, also before the Gen AI hype, this is like fundamental, like data quality and what you all just mentioned. But this moves me a bit towards the playbook for today. So like the very technical solution, and maybe also referring to your book, what would you advise to tech leaders if they need to tackle like the use cases you just mentioned before? If you need to start, how do you start and how do you tackle those challenges?
First of all, from a technology perspective, developers and architects love data streaming, right? Apache Kafka, the main de facto standard behind that, open source, is used by over 150,000 organizations. So from a tech level, it's pretty easy to convince people. And very often, if you are an executive, you don't even know how many people in your organization are already using data streaming in some projects. But unfortunately, from the executive perspective, or also from the business and product owner perspective, most people don't care about technology, right? So nobody there talks about Kafka, and sometimes not even about data streaming on the higher level. What most people on that level talk about is business problem. It's about innovation. It's about solving existing problems or about faster time to market. So my recommendation here is clearly to lead on that level with business conversations, and therefore industry specific in most cases. So in most of meetings I do at customers, and I travel around the world every month to meet customers across industries. And in most of my conversations, I lead with success stories. So if I go to an airline, I talk, for example, about what Lufthansa is doing with Confluent. If I go to a bank, I can talk all the success stories from our banks worldwide that use it for both IT modernization, like mainframe offloading, for cost reduction, but also for the next generation generative AI customer support that they built with. And with this, across industries, I lead with the right stories. And this is exactly the right way to convince people, because I have this every week when 10 people or 50 people in the room to get an introduction about data streaming. I tell 5 to 10 very different success stories, in most cases industry specific. And this creates follow-ups where the people want to learn more.
So what personally drives you to keep pushing this message forward? What is your why behind all of this?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, right? I'm here now at Confluent for 8+ years, which is a very long time for both for the technology and the company. And I see this adoption of data streaming around the world, and it's evolving. So I really compare it more to an Oracle database 20+ years ago. And if you take a look at Oracle today, they first built the database in several steps, right? It got better and better. And this is why even after 8 years here, it's still very motivating, because I think we are still in the early stage, similarly like Oracle 15, 18 years ago. And this is why it's still motivating. And I don't see something more interesting, right? Because it's just starting. And especially now with the discussion around agentic AI, if you think about that, these agents, by nature, they are event-based, right? So they need to take action right now on the right context. And so data streaming is the perfect fit here. And this is why I'm still very motivated. I'm continuing.
Creating a category, and this is tough in terms of positioning. So it takes a lot of effort to make everybody understand when it comes to team leadership, or also making sure that there are skeptical technical people, and also they maybe challenge the asset of real-time data. What's your usual discussion point? How can you convince, and what would you recommend is the best way to go for if other people struggle with the same situation?
This is happening in every organization, right? Because there is always this question, why do you need this new technology and where does it help? I have older technologies, I want to keep them, which is fine. That's why we very often position ourselves as being more complementary. We integrate with others. But from a much bigger picture, this is not just a technology discussion. So as we discussed, typically you need to lead by the use case and by the business problems. And with that, you can map it down. Can your existing technology solve it? Then typically you don't buy something new if there is no value. And therefore we take a look at the use cases and explain where other customers leverage data streaming to get an advantage, like on the high level, reduced cost, reduced risk, increased revenue, or faster time to market. And then we can map it down to where we can help. To give you one concrete example, from Allianz, which is one of the largest insurance companies worldwide. I mean, they announced, I think, 2-3 years ago that they transitioned 75% of their workloads to the cloud. This is not a one-year project. This is a multi-year project. But data streaming is at the heart of that. Similarly, what I talked about at Generali, so they have hundreds of backend systems from legacy and on-premise and need to connect that to data streaming and then to the new world in the cloud. And then they also do the migrations and cutovers. And what we learned from here, back to your main question, is this is not just about technology. This is also the human factor. So data streaming is a change in the paradigm shift. So this is also a mind shift. And therefore, we actually have Allianz speaking at many of our events where we do data streaming tours and so on in different cities. And what Allianz prefers to talk about is not just the technology, because there's so much material already and the best practices. They talk about the organizational change and change management. And this is where it's really, really important to take everybody where they are today and support them evolving and adding data streaming to their existing stack and knowledge and best practices. So we call this a data streaming organization, where customers like Allianz build a center of excellence. And with that, then they help on all the different levels. And depending on who you talk to, for developers, it's more like doing a coding workshop. For architects, it's about best practices and design patterns and ANDI patterns. And on the executive levels, we focus on business value. So we talk about how much money did other customers save when they offload from a mainframe to Confluent? Or how much faster is time to market if you roll it out with a data streaming platform instead of a traditional middleware? And this, in the end, is an approach which we see more and more. So we need to be prepared on all the different levels. But the human factor is critical, because only technology does not change things.
So you've seen a lot, but what's the critical blind spot that the tech leaders still ignore and don't see? Could you point this experience out?
Yeah, absolutely. The funny thing is, and you're right, I was around number 100 or so when Confluent just expanded to Europe. And in the end, it's not really changing. So the blind spot is still the same like before. And the main question is, when should you use data streaming, or why do you need that? The foundation is still the same like 8 years ago. I explained what is data streaming, what's the big difference, what's the impact on the business side, and how can it fit into the enterprise architecture to complement your existing technologies and take you where you are brownfield and help you innovate, get faster time to market.
All right, take time. So executives need solutions, not tech stack only, like real world stories we heard today. Data streaming's value lies in real-time business results, revenue, reduced cost, minimized risk. So I really understand that the business comes first, even though if it's a very technical infrastructure topic. And I also think it's like interesting to kind of have the human factor in this whole conversation, like understanding like why are you doing it, and how to win skeptical stakeholders. And last but not least, that you gave some advice on how to successfully start implementation, like from clear industry specific use cases, that you compare them and not only the technical capabilities.